Hi, this is Sam Weigel with V1 Rotate, the web series for new and aspiring professional pilots. This week, we're going to talk about checkrides and some of the things that you can do to remove the stress and make passing them a breeze. By my count, in 29 years of flying, I've taken something like 51 checkrides for certificates, ratings, type ratings, and Part 135 and Part 121 initial and recurrent training. I've also taken 20 or 25 line checks with a line check airman or a FAA safety inspector riding along on the jump seat. Nowadays, for me, checkrides are no big deal. You could say that being a professional pilot is being a professional checkride taker. That said, I do remember being a 16-year-old student pilot regarding the approach of my 17th birthday and my private pilot checkride with mild terror. That's a pretty common reaction to checkrides for newer pilots, sometimes lasting well into one's professional training. It doesn't have to be this way. I'm going to share some tips with you that have helped me not just pass checkrides, but actually enjoy them.
Making checkrides a breeze, tip number 1, be prepared. Better yet, be over-prepared.
This first one should be painfully obvious, but every designated pilot examiner will tell you that they regularly encounter applicants who are not well prepared for their checkride. There is sometimes this perception that your instructor will spoon feed you everything you need to know, and once they sign you off, you just need to show up and perform. That's generally not the case. Even if you sneak through a few practical exams that way, those habits will not serve you well later in your career. You need to get in the habit of prepping yourself for every single checkride. Examiners can generally tell immediately how much work an applicant has put into preparation, and that first impression can strongly affect how the checkride goes. But how to prepare? Well, I can tell you that almost every single checkride of your career will be extremely standardized and prescribed. Everything you are expected to do is written down somewhere, and it's generally available to the applicant. For certificates and ratings, this used to be the FAA's Practical Test Standards, or PTS, but in recent years, many PTSs have been replaced by the Aircrew Certification Standards, or ACS.
The PTS or ACS lists everything you'll be asked about during the oral portion of your practical test, as well as the maneuvers and procedures you will need to demonstrate during the flight portion. Your instructor should be using it as a reference during your final flight lessons, but you should also use it as a guide for your own private study, choosing topics to review and flagging any that seem a little hazy to you.
I find it really helpful to have a study buddy who can quiz me, and vice versa. In an airline program, that's usually my training partner. For you, it might be another student pilot who is getting ready for a checkride at the same time as you. I always make up flashcards for the things I need to learn by rote, and even a non-pilot can test you on these. My wife, Dawn, has assisted me with flashcard study throughout my career. For a private pilot checkride, I would make flashcards of all your aircraft limitations, systems, emergency procedures, and regulatory data such as VFR, cloud clearance, and visibility minimums, minimum aircraft equipment, and so on. I strongly recommend taking a mock checkride with an instructor who is not your own, preferably one you don't know well. They should administer the entire practical test, including flight and oral portions, exactly as laid out in the PTS or ACS. I recommend doing this about a week before your actual checkride to give you and your instructor time to work through any weak areas uncovered by the mock run-through.
Tip number 2, don't let checkriditis freak you out.
So, you're studying your brains out and pestering your instructor to fly with you extra to burnish those rough edges, when, to your shock, you're suddenly plateaued and even backslidden to the point that you can't make a good landing to save your life. Don't worry, this is extremely common. It even has a name, checkriditis. There's a reason your instructor doesn't seem too worried about it. It's because they see the same behavior in 80% of their students. It's normal. Don't let it mess with your head too much. Have patience, keep working, and tell yourself that you're going to shine on your big day.
Tip number 3, avoid using Santa Claus or the Grinch.
When I was flight instructing in Southern California, there was one designated pilot examiner who was known as Santa Claus because you apparently could not fail with him. Well, he was very popular, he commanded a higher than standard fee, he was booked up for months, and there was a certain type of student who would insist on going to him and only him. I sent one student to Santa Claus, another examiner had canceled last minute, and Santa Claus had a last minute opening. Well, he failed my student for a very unusual reason that didn't quite pass the smell test. Later on, I discovered that the standard foreign student backsheesh for Santa Claus was a fifth of Remy XO. My student didn't bring the Remy. Back when I was instructing, it was the CFIs who tended to arrange check rides and pick the DPEs. These days, it's more often the student. Every region has their notorious Santa Clauses, and I would suggest that you steer clear of them. They may pass the majority of applicants, but they tend to be pretty capricious about who they fail. And anyways, what does it say about your training and your certificate if you need a gimme for your check ride? That said, there are a few DPEs out there that are known for being tough to the point of cruelty, and they also have a bit of a racket going. They'll charge $800 for a check ride that lasts 20 minutes before the pink slip, and then collect another $800 on the retest the following week. These Grinches are generally pretty well known in the community, so ask around before you book your check ride. Now, keep in mind that a reputation for being tough but fair is far different than being a Grinch. When I was an instructor, I sent most of my students to a DPE who is known for being tough but fair. All these students passed, and they reported a great check ride experience.
Tip number 4, get in the zone and stay in the zone.
So much of successful check ride taking is mental. Especially earlier in your career, it's easy to build the check ride up to be more than it is and get a bad case of nerves. On the other hand, a little stress can be a powerful stimulant to rise and shine. Honestly, I've done a lot of my best flying on check rides. You just gotta approach it with the right attitude. The first thing to know is that the DPE is human. They've taken a lot of check rides too, and with the exception of the aforementioned Grinches, they do not want to fail you. It makes them sad, and it's extra work for them. So lose your fear of the DPE. They're just a knowledgeable passenger riding along while you demonstrate the skills and the knowledge that you know you have. Think about this. Every experienced DPE has seen one of their applicants go on to have an accident that hurt or killed themselves and perhaps others. Think about what that does to an examiner. I did my private pilot check ride with Bill Mavenkamp Sr., one of Minnesota's most prolific DPEs, and I'll never forget the look of deep concern on his face as he handed me my private license and said, "This is your license to learn." DPEs mostly just want to see that you're a safe and conscientious pilot, that you're going to make the conservative decisions, that your control of the airplane is smooth and positive and doesn't take the ship anywhere that your brain hasn't been 5 minutes prior. All that is honestly more important than any one task on the ACS. That's why it's so important that you keep your head in the game when something goes wrong on your check ride. And trust me, it will. I don't think I've flown a perfect check ride yet. I've actually come pretty close to busting a few. Probably the closest was on a Part 135 proficiency check when I actually busted minimums on an instrument approach because I accidentally used Category A mins instead of Category B. The crusty old check airman berated me, exclaiming, "When was the last time you flew Category A anything?" He later admitted that the only reason he didn't fail me was because I flew such a nice missed approach and subsequent holding pattern while he was chewing me out. Honestly, a big part of staying in the zone on your check ride is losing your fear of failure. If you screw up to the point of getting a pink slip, it's not a big deal. There's a ton of pilots out there with 1 or 2 check ride busts in their past, and it's particularly common among flight instructor applicants. So, when you screw up, don't let the specter of failure drag you down the dark road of imagining the end of your career, your friends making fun of you, etc. Buck up and concentrate on flying the plane well. Maybe you'll still get a pink slip, or maybe you'll slip through on the evidence of your resiliency.
Tip number 5, show up ready to learn something.
Theoretically, check rides are not supposed to be training, they're supposed to be checking. And yet, I've learned something on nearly every check ride I've taken. The thing is, DPEs and other evaluators are instructors too, and like all instructors, they love seeing the light bulb go on in a student's head. When they see you learning something on the check ride, they know you'll continue to learn after the check ride. So, don't just show up to prove your medal or collect a certificate, show up to learn something. It'll make the experience so much better for you and for your DPE. Best of luck with your upcoming check ride. Once you pass with flying colors, don't forget to come back here to flyingmag.com for more great content for new and aspiring professional pilots every first and third Friday of the month.